"Sir, he went this way," said the Lurl, but he had no idea he was being deceived. Michael Thompson was walking down the quiet street when he heard hurried footsteps approaching. The night was warm in Chicago, and the city guard was completing another routine patrol through the Lincoln Park neighborhood when a child's voice made him stop. "Sir, he went this way," shouted the girl, running toward him with tears in her eyes. "My father needs help." Michael looked at the child, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her curly hair was messy and the pink t-shirt she wore had dirt stains. The urgency in her voice immediately put him on alert. "Calm down, little one. What happened to your father?" asked Michael, crouching down to her eye level. He was chased by some men and hid in that building over there. But now I can't find him anymore." The girl sobbed while pointing to a residential building a few blocks away. Michael carefully observed the child's expression. There was something in her eyes that intrigued him, an anxiety that seemed to go beyond fear for her father. Even so, his protective instinct spoke louder. "What's your name?" he asked, grabbing his radio to report the situation. "Emily," she answered, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Please, sir, let's hurry. My father might be hurt." Without further hesitation, Michael followed the girl through the poorly lit streets of the neighborhood. Emily ran a few meters ahead, always looking back to make sure he was following. Her bare feet made little noise on the warm asphalt, and she seemed to know those streets very well. Along the way, Michael tried to get more information about what had happened, but the girl's answers were vague and confused. She said her father worked as a doorman in a nearby building and had witnessed something he shouldn't have. The more details she tried to give, the more nervous she became. "Here, sir." Emily stopped in front of a 3-story residential building. "He went in here and went up the stairs. He said he would hide on the top floor until the situation passed." Michael examined the building. It was an old building with peeling paint and some broken windows. It didn't seem to have been inhabited for a long time. Something in his years of experience working the streets told him there was something strange about this situation, but the girl's distress seemed genuine. "Emily, are you sure your father came in here?" he asked, observing the front door that was slightly ajar. "Yes, I am. Please, let's go up." She pulled him by the sleeve of his uniform. Michael turned on his flashlight and entered the building, followed by the girl. The smell of mold and dampness was strong, and the stair steps creaked under their feet. The walls had old graffiti, and there was trash scattered in the corners. This was definitely not a place where someone would choose to hide. "Dad! Dad, where are you?" shouted Emily, her voice echoing through the empty hallway. They went up to the 3rd floor but found no one. Michael checked all the apartments, but they were all empty or had been locked for a long time. The dust accumulated on the doorknobs showed that no one had passed through there recently. "Emily, there's no one here," said Michael, beginning to suspect that something wasn't right. "Are you sure it was this building?" The girl stopped searching and turned to him. Her tears had stopped flowing, and now there was a different expression on her face. It was as if she was fighting an internal battle with herself. "Sir," her voice came out softer now. I lied." Michael felt a mixture of relief and concern. Relief because it meant there was no father in danger, but concern because a child her age wouldn't lie about something like that without having a very serious reason. "Why did you lie, Emily?" The girl looked at the floor, playing with the hem of her pink t-shirt. "Because I needed someone to come with me. I needed help, but when I tell the truth, the adults don't listen to me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Michael crouched down again to be at eye level with Emily. His experience dealing with children in vulnerable situations told him he needed to be patient and earn her trust to understand what was really happening. "Can you tell me the truth now?" "I promise I'll listen," he said in a calm voice. Emily looked into his eyes as if weighing whether she could trust him. After a few seconds, she gestured for him to follow her. "Come with me. But please don't leave when you see," she asked in a small voice. She led him to a door at the end of the 3rd floor hallway. Unlike the others, this one had no padlock and was slightly ajar. Emily pushed the door open, and entered what appeared to have been an ordinary apartment. Michael turned on his flashlight again and was surprised by what he saw. The apartment had been turned into a kind of makeshift home. There were mattresses on the floor, some old pots stacked in a corner, and clothes hung on clotheslines made with ropes tied from one wall to another. But what caught his attention the most were the drawings taped to the walls. Dozens of drawings made with colored pencils and crayons always showed the same scene: a police officer or guard saving families, protecting children, helping people in trouble. "Do you live here?" asked Michael, trying to process the situation. "I do," Emily replied softly. "Me and Grandma Margaret." It was then that Michael heard a moan coming from one of the rooms. Emily ran toward the sound, and he followed her. In the room, they found an elderly lady lying on a mattress on the floor, covered with several blankets despite the night's heat. The woman must have been about 70 years old, and even in the dim light of the flashlight, Michael could see she was very pale and breathing with difficulty. Her clothes were soaked with sweat, and she seemed to have a high fever. "Grandma, I brought help," said Emily, kneeling beside the lady and holding her hand. Michael approached and placed his hand on the woman's forehead. She was burning up with fever. "How long has she been like this?" he asked. 3 days, replied Emily. "She can't get up and hardly eats anything. I tried to buy medicine, but I didn't have enough money." "Emily, we need to take your grandmother to the hospital now," said Michael, already taking out his radio to call an ambulance. "No!" the girl shouted, grabbing his arm. "She doesn't want to go. She said if we go to the hospital, they'll take me away from her." Michael immediately understood the situation. Margaret was afraid that social services would separate her from her granddaughter if they found out they were living in poor conditions. It was a common fear among many families in vulnerable situations. "Grandma, this is the guard I told you about," said Emily, gently touching her grandmother's face. "He came to help us." Margaret opened her eyes with effort and looked at Michael. Even weakened, there was strength in her gaze. "Sir, don't let them take my girl," she managed to whisper. "Mrs. Margaret, first we're going to take care of your health. Then we'll talk about the rest," said Michael in a firm but gentle voice. He called the ambulance but asked them to come without sirens to avoid drawing attention from the neighbors. While they waited, he tried to better understand how Emily and Margaret had ended up in that situation. "We used to live in a small house in Pilsen," Emily told him. "But Grandma lost her housekeeping job when she got sick with back problems, and we couldn't pay the rent anymore. The landlord gave us 1 week to leave." "And how did you find this place?" "Grandma knew the building superintendent from when people still lived here. He let us stay in the apartment until we found another place, but then he moved out of town and we were left alone." Michael calculated they must have been there for at least a few months, judging by how they had organized the space. Emily's dedication in caring for her grandmother was touching, but an 8-year-old shouldn't have that responsibility. "Emily, how do you get food and the things you need?" The girl looked at the floor, ashamed. "I sell candy and gum at the Michigan Avenue intersection. Sometimes people give us food too. And there's a lady who has a diner near here who always gives me leftover bread." Michael's heart tightened. An 8-year-old selling candy in traffic to support her sick grandmother. He thought of his own daughter, Olivia, who was nearly the same age as Emily and was home at that moment, sleeping in her warm bed with no worries beyond playtime and homework. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. The paramedics quickly assessed Margaret and confirmed she needed urgent medical attention. Her blood pressure was very low and the fever indicated a possible infection. "I'm going with her," declared Emily, trying to climb into the ambulance. "Of course you are," said Michael, "and I'm coming too." During the trip to Mercy Medical Center, Michael held Emily's hand while the paramedics cared for Margaret. The girl was silent, but he could feel the fear radiating from her. "Emily, you were very brave taking care of your grandmother all alone," he said. "But you're not alone anymore, understand?" She looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "You won't leave me?" "I won't leave," promised Michael. At the hospital, while Margaret was being treated by doctors, Michael had to deal with a series of bureaucratic protocols. The hospital social worker, Susan Parker, a 50-year-old woman with a professional demeanor, began asking questions about the family situation. "Officer, I understand you found this child in an irregular situation," said Susan, flipping through some papers. "We'll need to involve Child Protective Services to assess whether she can remain with her grandmother." "You don't even know the full situation yet," replied Michael, trying to remain calm. "I know an 8-year-old was alone caring for an elderly woman in an abandoned building. That's enough to characterize neglect and risk." Emily, who was sitting in a chair nearby, heard the conversation and jumped up. "No, Grandma didn't put me at risk. She's taken care of me my whole life," shouted the girl. "Sweetheart, I know you love your grandmother, but sometimes love isn't enough. You need a real home, school, proper nutrition," explained Susan in a condescending voice. "I have all that. Grandma always took care of me." Emily was beginning to cry. Michael knelt down and put his hands on the girl's shoulders. "Emily, no one will separate you without us having a proper conversation first. I promise," he said, giving Susan a firm look. "Officer, with all due respect, you don't have the authority to make that kind of promise," retorted the social worker. "I may not have authority, but I have community knowledge and know there are alternatives before separating a family," replied Michael. At that moment, a doctor approached with news about Margaret. "She has a severe respiratory infection, worsened by malnutrition and exposure to cold and dampness. We'll need to hospitalize her for at least a week for proper treatment." "Doctor, is there any risk?" asked Michael. "If she had arrived a few days later, yes. But now that she's being properly treated, the recovery should be complete." Emily sighed with relief, but soon remembered the threat of separation. "Can I stay at the hospital with her?" "Unfortunately, we don't have the facilities for that," replied the doctor. "But you can visit during visiting hours." Susan saw an opportunity. "Perfect. During this period, Emily can stay with a temporary foster family. It will be better for everyone." "No!" Emily ran and hid behind Michael. "I won't go. I'd rather stay on the street." Michael felt the trust the girl had placed in him and knew he couldn't let her down. But he also knew he couldn't resolve that situation alone at that moment. "Susan, may I have a private word with you?" They stepped a few meters away from Emily. "Look, I understand your concern for the child's well-being, but separating her from her grandmother now may cause more harm than good," argued Michael. "Officer, I've been doing this work for 15 years. I know how to recognize when a child is at risk. And I've been working on the streets for 8 years, and I know how to recognize when a family just needs support, not separation. Emily is not being neglected. She's being loved and cared for within their means." Susan sighed. "Even if I wanted to consider other options, where will this child stay while her grandmother is hospitalized? She can't go back to that building alone," Michael thought quickly. He couldn't take Emily home without following proper protocols, but he also couldn't let her be taken to a strange family. "Give me 24 hours to find a suitable solution," he requested. "Officer, 24 hours. If I don't find a viable alternative, I'll accept that she be referred to temporary foster care." Susan looked at Emily, who was watching the conversation with an anxious expression. "All right, but she needs to stay in a safe place tonight." Michael nodded. He had some ideas, but would need to make some calls first. First, he called his wife, Jennifer. "Michael, what time is it? Is everything all right?" Jennifer answered the phone with a sleepy voice. "Honey, I need to tell you about a situation. I found a girl who needs a place to stay tonight." Michael explained the whole situation to Jennifer. His wife, who worked as a nursing assistant and had a huge heart for children, didn't hesitate. "Bring her here. Olivia will love having a little friend at home." Next, Michael called Father Patrick from St. Mary's Church in the neighborhood where he worked. The priest had always been a partner of the city guard in situations involving vulnerable families. "Father, sorry for calling so late, but I have a delicate situation." "Speak, my son, I'm listening." Michael told the story of Emily and Margaret. "I understand. Look, Michael, we have a program at the parish for situations like this. We can help with temporary housing, meals, and even with documentation if necessary. I'll talk with Mrs. Robertson, who coordinates the church's women's group. I'm sure she'll want to help." "Father, but without involving too much bureaucracy, at least for now. The girl is traumatized by the possibility of being separated from her grandmother. I understand perfectly. Let's take it slow and focus first on Mrs. Margaret's recovery. When Michael returned to where Emily was, she looked at him with hope. So, what's going to happen to me? You're going to spend tonight at my house, with my family. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. Really? Emily's eyes lit up. Really? My wife, Jennifer, and my daughter, Olivia, are waiting for you. Susan, who had heard part of the conversation, approached. Officer, this is quite irregular. Susan, technically I'm assuming temporary responsibility for the minor under your supervision. Tomorrow I'll present a formal proposal. Before leaving the hospital, Michael and Emily went to see Margaret in the room where she had been admitted. The elderly woman was sleeping, but her breathing seemed calmer and her fever had gone down. "Grandma," whispered Emily, holding her hand. Margaret opened her eyes slightly. "My girl, are you all right?" "Yes, Grandma. Officer Michael is going to take care of me until you get better." "Officer Michael?" Margaret looked at him. "You can rest easy, Mrs. Margaret. Emily is safe." "Thank you," she said, weakly squeezing Michael's hand. "Take good care of her. You can count on me." On the way home, Emily was quiet in the back seat of the patrol car. Michael could see her in the rearview mirror, looking out the window at the streets of Chicago passing by. "Emily, is everything all right?" "Mr. Michael, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why are you helping me?" "I lied to you." Michael thought about the answer for a moment. "You know, Emily, sometimes people do wrong things for the right reasons. You lied because you were desperate to get help for your grandmother. That doesn't make the lie right, but it shows you have a good heart." "My grandma always says I shouldn't lie." "And she's right, but I also understand that you're just a child and you were very scared. The important thing is that now we're going to find a way to help you both the right way." When they arrived at Michael's house, Jennifer was waiting at the door. She was a 40-year-old woman, short and sturdy, with brown hair tied in a ponytail and a welcoming smile on her face. "You must be Emily," said Jennifer, bending down to the girl's level. "It's so nice to meet you." Emily looked shyly at Jennifer and then at Michael. "Hi," she said softly. "Are you hungry?" "I warmed up some soup and made a sandwich." "Yes, ma'am." "You can call me Aunt Jennifer, okay?" Olivia, the daughter of Michael and Jennifer, came downstairs in her pajamas. She was a cheerful 9-year-old girl with curly hair and curious eyes. "Hi, I'm Olivia. My dad said you were going to sleep here tonight." Emily smiled shyly. It was the first time Michael had seen her really smile. "Hi, I'm Emily. Want to see my room? My mum put an extra mattress there for you." While the girls went upstairs, Jennifer pulled Michael into the kitchen. "Honey, what a sad situation. She's so young and has already been through so much." "Yeah. And tomorrow I need to find a solution that doesn't involve separating her from her grandmother. I talked to my sister Rebecca. She said she can help if we need it. You know she always wanted to have children and never could." Michael knew Rebecca, Jennifer's sister-in-law. She was a 45-year-old single woman who worked as a teacher and always showed special affection for children. But he knew Emily wouldn't accept anything that meant being away from Margaret. "Let's see how things develop tomorrow. First, I want to understand their whole situation better. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing." The next morning, Michael woke up early and found Emily and Olivia in the living room watching cartoons. The two seemed to have formed an instant connection. "Good morning, girls." "Good morning, Daddy," said Olivia. "Emily told me she knows how to make kites. She's going to teach me." "How cool." Michael smiled, but he could see that behind Emily's excitement, there was still worry about her grandmother. After breakfast, he took Emily back to the hospital to visit Margaret. The elderly woman was visibly better, able to sit up in bed and talk normally. "Grandma," Emily ran to hug her. "My dear, how are you? Did you sleep well?" "I did. Officer Michael's family is so kind." Olivia is almost my age and she has tons of books. Margaret looked at Michael with gratitude. Mr. Thompson, how can I thank you? No need to thank me, Mrs. Margaret, but I do need to speak with you about some important matters. Michael explained the situation with the social worker and the need to find a more stable solution for them. Sir, I understand our situation isn't ideal, but Emily is all I have in this world. She's also all I have. We lost the rest of our family in an accident 3 years ago. Tell me what happened. Margaret took a deep breath before beginning. Emily is my youngest daughter, Samantha's child. She was a single mother and worked as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic. The 3 of us lived together in a small but comfortable house. And what happened 3 years ago? Samantha was returning from work on a bus when there was a serious accident on the expressway. Several people were injured, but my daughter, she didn't survive her injuries. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Emily, who was playing with a doll she had brought from Jennifer's house, stopped and looked at her grandmother. Grandma. It's all right, my dear. I'm just telling our story to Officer Michael. Margaret continued. After we lost Samantha, I had to stop working to care for Emily full-time. She was very shaken and needed constant attention. I lived off my savings and some sewing work I did at home. And how did you end up in your current situation? Last year, I started having back problems. I couldn't sit and sew for long periods anymore, and the work dwindled. At the same time, the owner of the house we were living in decided to sell the property and gave us 30 days to leave. Did you try to seek help from any public agencies? I tried, Mr. Thompson, but you know how these things are. Lots of paperwork, lots of waiting, and always the risk of them separating us. I preferred to try to handle it on my own. Michael understood Margaret's dilemma. Many vulnerable families avoided seeking official help for fear of having their children taken away. And how did you come to know about the building where you were living? Mr. Jenkins, who was the superintendent there, was our neighbor in the old house. When he learned about our situation, he offered the apartment temporarily until we found something else. But then he moved to Tennessee to live with his daughter, and we were left alone there. Mrs. Margaret, you understand that situation can't continue, right? It's not safe for you. I do understand, but what can I do? I don't have money for rent, and my pension hasn't come through yet. I applied, but they said it could take up to 6 months. Michael had an idea. Do you have the paperwork for your pension application? I do. It's all kept in a folder in the apartment. I'll go get those documents. I know a lawyer who handles pension cases. She might help speed up the process. Emily, who had been listening to the whole conversation quietly, approached Michael. Officer Michael, after Grandma gets out of the hospital, where are we going to live? It was the question Michael had been dreading. He still didn't have a definite answer, but he knew he needed to find a solution quickly. We're working on that, Emily, but I promise you'll stay together. You promise? I promise. Later that day, Michael went to the abandoned building to get Margaret's documents. The apartment was exactly as they had left it, and he could see better how Emily and her grandmother had organized the space to make it livable. There was a small makeshift library with old books Emily had been given or found. The drawings on the walls clearly showed the girl's dream, a protected and happy family, always with the figure of a guardian present. In a drawer, Michael found the folder with Margaret's documents. Besides the retirement papers, there were certificates showing she had worked as an elementary school teacher for over 20 years before retiring to take care of Emily. There were also some recommendation letters from former employers and co-workers, all praising Margaret's character and dedication. One of the letters especially caught Michael's attention. It was from a woman named Rachel Williams, who wrote about how Margaret had cared for her disabled daughter for 3 years when she had to travel for work. The letter had been written just 2 years before, showing that Margaret was recognized in the community as a trustworthy person who was good with children. Michael photographed all the documents and took the originals. A plan was forming in his mind, but he would need the help of several people to carry it out. As he left the building, he encountered a woman of about 50 waiting on the sidewalk. She wore simple but clean clothes and looked at the building with curiosity. "Excuse me," she addressed Michael when she saw him leaving. "Aren't you the officer who was here yesterday with a little girl?" "Yes, I am. Why?" "My name is Nancy Wilson. I have a snack shop right there on the corner. She pointed to a small store a few houses down. I knew the girl who lived here, Emily, right? You know her? Yes, I do. She always came to buy bread, and sometimes I gave her extras when we had leftovers. Such a polite girl, always said thank you and please. I was worried because I haven't seen her for 2 days. Michael smiled. It was good to know that Emily had made positive connections in the neighborhood. She's fine. Her grandmother got sick, and they're at the hospital now. That's good to hear. Look, if you need anything, you can count on me. That girl won me over. She always asked if I needed help carrying heavy things, even though she was so small. Mrs. Wilson, may I ask you a question? How did you see their situation here in the building? Nancy thought for a moment. Well, officer, I won't lie and say it was an ideal situation, but I saw the care they had for each other. Grandma was always worried about whether the girl was eating right, if she was doing her schoolwork that she herself taught, and the girl was always worried about whether Grandma was okay. Do you think they're a family that should stay together? Without a doubt. I've seen a lot of broken families in this neighborhood, but those two truly love each other. They just need a better opportunity. Michael thanked her for the information and took down Nancy's contact. It was becoming increasingly clear that Emily and Margaret did have a support network in the community. They just needed help formalizing a better situation. That afternoon, Michael went to the parish to talk with Father Patrick and Mrs. Robertson, the coordinator of the church's women's group. Mrs. Robertson was a 65-year-old widow who dedicated her time to helping families in need. Mr. Thompson, the father told me about the situation. What a touching story, said Mrs. Robertson. I have some ideas about how we can help. I'm listening. First, about housing. We have a small house that the church uses for emergency cases. It's just 2 bedrooms and a living room, but it's clean, safe, and all the paperwork is up to date. They can stay there for as long as they need. And what would be expected in return? Mrs. Margaret can help with children's catechism when she's fully recovered. From what you've told me, she was a teacher, right? We've been needing someone to help with the tutoring classes we give here at the church. Michael thought the proposal was perfect. It would give Margaret a way to feel useful and contribute while keeping the family together. And what about the legal side? The social worker is still pushing to take Emily. Father Patrick spoke up. I know the director of the local Child Protective Services. If we present a solid proposal with follow-up and a structured support network, I'm sure they'll support keeping the family together. What would this support network look like? Mrs. Robertson smiled. Well, I would be supervising the situation closely. The church would offer material support when needed. You, as the officer who discovered the situation and will follow up, and several other people from the community who have offered to help. What other people? Teacher Rebecca, the one Jennifer mentioned, offered to give Emily free tutoring. Mrs. Nancy from the diner said she can offer Margaret a small job helping out a few mornings a week once she recovers, and there are more people interested in helping. Michael was impressed by how quickly a support network had formed around Emily and Margaret. What about Margaret's retirement? Oh, I spoke with lawyer Catherine Johnson. She agreed to take the case pro bono. She said that with the documentation you have, it can be resolved within 2 months at most. The next morning, Michael, Father Patrick and Mrs. Robertson met with Susan, the social worker at the hospital. They presented the full support proposal for Emily and Margaret. Let me get this straight, said Susan, reviewing the papers they had brought. You want me to authorize the child to remain with the grandmother, based on an informal community support network? Not informal, corrected Father Patrick. Structured and documented. Everyone involved has signed commitment forms, and there will be official monthly follow-ups. And the housing situation? Taken care of, said Mrs. Robertson. Church-owned house, paperwork up to date, suitable conditions for a child. And income? Retirement being processed with priority, part-time work offered, and community support as needed, replied Michael. Susan read all the documents carefully. It was clear this wasn't an improvised solution, but a well-structured plan. I need to speak with my supervisor, but I must say I'm impressed with your dedication. Susan, can I speak to you as a mother? Mrs. Robertson addressed the social worker. Sometimes the best thing we can do for a child is to strengthen the family she already has, rather than create a new family for her. Susan sighed. I know that. But I also know how many cases I've seen where children suffered because we tried to keep families together when it wasn't feasible. And how many cases have you seen where children suffered because they were separated from families that could have been strengthened? Asked Michael. It was a tough question, and Susan stayed silent for a few moments. All right, I'll approve a 3-month trial period. If everything goes well, you can apply for permanent custody. When they returned to Margaret's room to share the news, they found Emily teaching her grandmother how to make an origami she had learned from Olivia. Grandma, look, I made a little bird, said Emily, showing the folded paper. How beautiful, sweetheart. You're so clever. Mrs. Margaret, Emily, we have good news, announced Michael. They explained the whole proposal. Margaret stayed silent for a long time, taking in all the information. You did all this for us? Her voice was choked up. Mrs. Margaret, the community takes care of its own, said Mrs. Robertson. And you are part of our community now. Emily jumped from the chair and ran to hug Michael. Officer Michael, does this mean Grandma and I get to stay together? It sure does, little one. And we'll have a real house. You're going to have a real house. And will I be able to go to school? You'll be able to go to school, and we'll even have tutoring lessons with Mrs. Rebecca. Emily started crying, but this time they were tears of joy. Margaret was also crying, holding Mrs. Robertson's hands. How can I ever thank you for all this? By taking good care of Emily and letting her be a child, replied Mrs. Robertson. And when you're feeling better, by helping us care for other children in need. 3 days later, Margaret was discharged from the hospital. Michael, Jennifer, and Olivia went to pick them up to take them to the house the church had provided. It was a simple 2-bedroom house in Lincoln Park, but clean, safe, and with all the basic furniture. Is this it? Asked Emily, looking at the house with wide eyes. This is it, confirmed Mrs. Robertson, handing the keys to Margaret. Emily ran to explore every room, Olivia running after her. The 2 girls had already become inseparable. Grandma, look! There's a big kitchen, and the bathroom has a shower, Emily shouted from inside the house. Margaret stood frozen in the doorway, still holding the keys as if she couldn't believe it was real. Mrs. Margaret, your new life begins now, said Michael. Mr. Michael, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. I don't know how... You don't need to say anything, just be happy. That evening, Jennifer had prepared a welcome party at the new house. Attending were Father Patrick, Mrs. Robertson, Nancy from the diner, lawyer Catherine Johnson, teacher Rebecca, and several other people from the community who had been involved in the situation. Emily was radiant, showing the house to everyone and talking about her plans to decorate her room. Margaret chatted animatedly with the other women, discussing how she could contribute to the church's activities. Michael watched the scene from a distance, pleased with the outcome. Jennifer approached him. What are you thinking about? About how a lie can sometimes lead to a beautiful truth, he replied. How so? Emily lied to me about her father being in danger, but in the end she really did have someone in danger. She had herself and her grandmother, and they really did need rescuing. And you rescued them? No, honey. The community rescued them. I was just the first step. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 2 weeks later, Emily was officially enrolled in the neighborhood school. Michael stopped by the house to check on how they were adjusting and found both sitting in the living room, Margaret helping Emily with her homework. Mr. Michael, Emily ran to hug him. Look at my math test. It was a test with a perfect score. Congratulations. You're doing so well in school. The teacher said I'm one of the most dedicated students in the class. And you know why? Why? Because now I can just concentrate on studying. Before I had to worry about so many things. Margaret smiled proudly. She wakes up excited to go to school every day. She's making lots of friends. And how are you feeling? Very well. I started helping with the church's catechism classes last week. It's so rewarding to work with children again. And the retirement? Lawyer Catherine Johnson said it should come through in the next 2 weeks. I'll finally have a fixed income. Michael learned that Margaret had become one of the parish's most beloved catechists. Her experience as a teacher and her natural patience with children made her a born educator. Emily, in turn, had excelled not only in her studies, but also as a caring child who always offered to help classmates in difficulty. 1 month later, Michael received a phone call from Susan, the social worker. "Mr. Thompson, I've been following the case of Emily and Margaret. And what's your assessment?" "Impressive. I've never seen such a positive transformation in such a short time. The child is clearly thriving, and the grandmother shows complete ability to care for her properly. This means I'll recommend permanent custody remain with Margaret. There are no more questions about their ability to stay together." Michael smiled. It was the official confirmation that his intuition had been right from the very beginning. 3 months after the night Emily had lied about her father being in danger, Michael received a special invitation. It was for a special presentation at Emily's school, where she would be part of a play about professions. On the day of the presentation, Michael arrived at the school accompanied by Jennifer and Olivia. The small audience consisted mainly of parents and family members of the students. Emily appeared on stage, wearing a child-sized security guard uniform that the women from the church had made especially for her. "My name is Emily Anderson Smith," she began her presentation with a clear, confident voice, "and I want to talk about the profession of a security guard." Michael was moved to hear Emily use the last name that Margaret had legally added to hers when they formalized all the documentation. "Security guards aren't just people who look after safety," Emily continued. "They also protect families, help lost children, and sometimes save people who didn't even know they needed saving." Emily's presentation was a success. She told the story of how a security guard had changed her life without going into too many personal details, but conveying the message that some heroes appear when we least expect them. After the presentation, Margaret approached Michael in the schoolyard. "Mr. Thompson, did you see how well our girl is growing up?" "I did, Mrs. Margaret. She's turning into an amazing young lady. She told me that when she grows up, she wants to be a security guard like you." Michael smiled. "She can be whatever she wants. She has the intelligence and determination for it." "And all thanks to you?" "No, Mrs. Margaret. All thanks to the love you've always given her. I just helped create the conditions for that love to flourish." That evening, Michael was at home having dinner with his family when Olivia made an observation. "Dad, you know Emily told me something interesting today." "What was it?" "She said that when she lied to you that night, she was praying for God to send someone to help them, and that you showed up right after." Jennifer looked at Michael with a smile. "Sometimes prayers are answered in ways we don't expect, right?" Michael thought about the coincidence. Or maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Maybe he was in the right place at the right time, because that's what was supposed to happen. 6 months after that first night, Michael was again making his routine patrol through Lincoln Park. It was a night similar to that one, warm with few people on the street. He passed by the house where Emily and Margaret lived and saw light in the living room window. He could hear voices talking animatedly inside. He knew it was Emily studying for a test with Margaret's help. A few more yards ahead, he passed the abandoned building where he had found them. It was exactly as before, empty, silent, waiting for a new story. Michael stopped and looked at the third-floor windows. He thought about how 2 lives had completely changed from that place which represented despair and was now just another empty building. His radio crackled. "Central to Unit 23. Unit 23, go ahead. We have a report of a lost child on State Street. Can you respond?" "On my way." Michael turned on the patrol car siren and headed to respond to the new incident. As he drove, he thought about how many other Emilys might be out there, needing someone to pay attention, to believe in them, to see beyond appearances. Arriving at the scene, he found a girl about 10 years old crying on the sidewalk. She was clean and well-dressed, clearly not a case of abandonment, but rather a child who had gotten separated from her family. "Hi, sweetie. I'm Officer Michael. What's your name?" "Hannah," the girl replied between sobs. "Hannah, we're going to find your family, okay? Tell me what happened." While helping Hannah reunite with her parents, who had lost their daughter in a nearby crowd, Michael thought about how each situation was unique, but they all had something in common: children needing protection and adults willing to provide it. A week later, Michael received an envelope with no return address on his desk at work. Inside was a drawing made with crayons. It was the image of a police officer in a blue uniform next to a girl in a pink shirt, both smiling with a house in the background and the sun shining in the sky. At the bottom of the drawing, written in a child's careful handwriting, was, "For Officer Michael, who believed me when I lied but helped anyway. Thank you for teaching me that lying isn't right, but that good people really do exist. With love, Emily." Michael kept the drawing in his wallet. It was a daily reminder that sometimes people do wrong things for the right reasons, and that a little compassion can change lives forever. 2 years later, Michael was promoted to coordinator of a new unit specializing in care for children and families in vulnerable situations. The first project he implemented was a protocol for cases like Emily's, situations where family separation can be prevented by strengthening the community support network. Emily, now 10 years old, was still one of the best students in her school. Margaret, fully recovered and with her retirement settled, had become the educational coordinator for the church's children's activities. During Emily's 10th birthday party, held at the house that now truly belonged to them, the church had decided to donate the property, Michael was invited to give a speech. 2 years ago, a brave girl did something she knew was wrong, but she did it anyway because the love she felt for her grandmother was greater than the fear of the consequences, Michael began, looking at Emily, who was sitting next to Margaret. "That girl taught me that sometimes we need to look beyond the words people say and see what they're really trying to tell us with their heart." Emily smiled and stood up. "Can I speak too?" "Of course," said Michael. "When I was little," Emily began, provoking laughter from the audience since she was still little, "I thought heroes were special people, different from everyone else. But Officer Michael showed me that anyone can be someone's hero. You just have to truly care." She looked at Margaret. "And Grandma showed me that true love never gives up, even when everything seems impossible." Then she looked at all the people present at the party: Father Patrick, Mrs. Robertson, Jennifer, Olivia, Nancy, Catherine, Rebecca, and so many others who had become part of her extended family. "But what I really learned is that heroes don't work alone. They work as a team. And I have the best team in the world." The party continued with much joy, music and stories being shared. Michael watched Emily playing with the other children and saw in her no longer the desperate girl he had found that night, but a secure, loved child full of dreams for the future. Later, when the party was ending and people were starting to leave, Emily approached Michael. "Officer Michael, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "That night when I lied about my father being in danger, I wasn't completely lying." Michael looked at her confused. "What do you mean? I really needed a father at that moment, and you showed up." Michael felt his eyes well up. Emily continued, "You didn't replace my grandma because nobody can do that, but you became like a father to me, and now I have a grandma who's like a mother, and a father who's like a protective friend. Emily, thank you for believing my lie long enough to discover my truth." Michael hugged Emily, remembering the first time she had run toward him on that dark street, desperate for help. Now, 2 years later, she wasn't running from something anymore, but running toward a future full of possibilities. "You know what else, Officer Michael?" "What?" "Now, when I see sad children at school or on the street, I always think, do they need someone like you? And sometimes I talk to them, because I learned that being helped is good, but helping others is even better." Margaret approached the two. "Emily, how about we go home? Tomorrow you have school early." "Let's go, Grandma." Emily gave Michael one last hug. "See you later, Officer Michael, and thank you for everything, always." As Michael drove home that night, he reflected on how a simple decision to follow a frightened child had changed not only Emily and Margaret's lives, but also his own. He had learned that being a community protector went far beyond doing rounds and responding to calls. It meant being willing to see people as they really were, not as they seemed at first glance. And he had also learned that lies can sometimes hide much deeper and more important truths than the words themselves. At home, Jennifer was waiting up. "How was the party?" "Perfect," Michael answered. "Emily is growing up and turning into an amazing girl." "And how are you feeling?" Michael thought about the question. Grateful. Grateful for being in the right place at the right time and for making the right decision. "You saved them." "Actually, honey, I think they saved me too. They showed me that the work I do can really make a difference in people's lives, that sometimes a simple gesture can change a life forever." Jennifer smiled and kissed her husband's forehead. "I'm proud of you." In the early hours of that morning, Michael had a dream. He dreamed he was back on that dark street 2 years ago, but this time he could see the future. He could see Emily happy and safe, Margaret healthy and fulfilled, and a whole community united around a common goal, protecting and caring for one another. In the dream, when Emily shouted, "Sir, he went this way," Michael knew exactly what she was really saying. "Please see me, please help me, please don't leave me alone." And he had seen, he had helped, and he had never left her alone. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and family love. Do you believe Michael made the right decision in trusting Emily? How would you react if you encountered a child in a similar situation? Leave your comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.